So I was going to start, more with the background first, but since you just are coming from a story or something, maybe you can kind of walk me through that. I mean, you don't have to go into detail, but just I'm trying
Mhm.
to get an idea of what, the day in the life of the reporter. So maybe
Yeah.
you could even give me an example of, walk me through that whole process of getting the story and then interviewing
Mhm.
people and running back to, and to write the story and all that.
Yeah. Well, so most of my mornings, I would actually say all of my mornings, the first hour follows the same formula. I start at 6 a.m. and we have a morning newsletter that's sent out here at the Seattle Times at 7:15. That's our target time every morning. So as the morning reporter, we aim to write, my editor and I, at least one story a day for that morning newsletter, which means that when I log on at 6, we have a couple minutes to discuss, okay, like what happened overnight? Is there any breaking news right now? What do people need to know? We have a short conversation and then I'm off to writing. And then I usually file that story by 6:45 for my editor to edit it, and we get it in the morning newsletter. Some mornings I'm doing that multiple times for different stories. Like the other morning there was a traffic story. Highway 18 was closed, and I was also juggling a weather story. So every morning is different in that way. After that initial sprint, morning newsletter is out at 7:15. That's when the rest of my day is truly open. It is going out on assignments for breaking news. This morning, I was at UW, and I was there yesterday morning as well, because some students are doing an encampment right now to show solidarity for Palestine, and they are camping in this area called the Quad. It's right in the middle of campus. They've got tents. They intend to stay until the university kind of responds to what they're asking for. So I was covering that yesterday. It started at 8 a.m. So that's like kind of in the sweet spot of like I'm done with the morning newsletter stuff. I had the rest of the day to go out and about. And then we actually had a rotation of reporters at UW yesterday because I was only there for a couple hours. Then we had another reporter there, and then we had our night reporter there in the evening. So I just went back this morning to check, see what was happening, see how many people were still left, and do a quick update for my editor before heading back for this interview. And then the rest of my day, I have another interview at 11 that I need to do for a story. I've got just some research to do on story ideas for the week. I typically do that at the beginning of the week. And yeah, the rest of it is truly open-ended. It's a lot of quick, fast-paced response to things that are happening in real time.
Yeah, well, then see, now I've got like several questions now. So, 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 so the first question is,
Mhm.
when you do the newsletter, is that like an internal thing that you're doing just for the other reporters, or does that go external?
That is external. It is
Oh,
our called Morning Brief, and I believe it's our biggest newsletter. And it goes out to our digital subscribers,
oh,
or anyone who is, I guess, has opted in for that newsletter. But a lot of the like traffic page views that come to my stories in the morning are straight from people clicking in that morning newsletter. So we have a huge audience that expects that in their inbox every morning, at least Monday
wow.
through Friday. Yeah.
Okay, and so do you have a certain beat that you cover for the newspaper?
Mhm. Yeah. So as the morning reporter, it's both breaking news and general assignment, which I like to think, both of those are very broad. Breaking news can be anything. Typically for me, it's traffic, shootings, kind of law and justice type things. There's a lot of intersection there. And then general assignment is truly like anything under the sun. I personally really like to cover weather, because for me, it allows me to be really voicey and insert like a bit of my personality into the writing, which I don't have any room to do in breaking news. So it kind of balances it out.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because what I did when I was, well, a long time ago, when I was in college, and I had the opportunity to actually start working for a newspaper while I was still in college. You
Hmm.
either could go in two directions. It was either you wanted to do news or you wanted to do features. So to
Yeah.
me personally, I felt like I couldn't be humorous. I couldn't inject any of my personality into a news story, especially when you're talking about like a fire or somebody got run
Totally.
over by a train or something, right? And
Mhm.
then I'm thinking, I really don't want to sit in somebody's living room after their, husband's been, killed or something,
Yeah.
and have to ask those really hard questions. And then the
Mhm.
features people are always going to parties and premieres and
Right?
interviewing
Trying new
celebrities.
restaurants.
Yeah, and I said,
Yeah.
definitely features, but what drew you to news, to what you're doing?
Well, it's funny because I followed the same path. I was totally interested in features at first. That interest kind of became clear to me while I was still in college, kind of toward the end of my senior year. I knew that I liked the more lifestyle type of writing, those types of beats. I was really interested in food. So actually, when I started at the Seattle Time, I was in features. I started as a news assistant, which is it was a part-time temporary role. I like to think of it as very similar to an internship. So I did that for the summer right after I graduated from WSU. Um, and within that role, it was in features, and I was kind of just organizing like our listings of like, here's, 10 places to go for 4th of July if you want lunch or, something like that. I did that over the summer, and then a position opened up also in features as the producer, and that is the person who does all of the digital work for that section specifically. So managing the features, desks, analytics, sending out the stories on social media, sending out newsletters that are specific to the features desk. So I did that for a year, and I was happy doing that, but that was not a reporting role. And I knew that I wanted to get my byline out there more. I had a little bit of time to do some writing while I was in features, but it wasn't as often as I wanted to be doing it. So my switch over to news was actually inspired or encouraged by an editor. I had been doing that features producing position, that digital role for about a year, and a position opened up on the Metro desk, the morning reporter, which I'm doing now. My editor approached me and asked if I was interested in doing it, and I actually said no because I was like, this is like hard news. I'm unfamiliar with this. I've always thought, let me stay over in features and like let the reporters who are really passionate about law and justice or whatever it is, let them do that, and I'll do this type of thing. So I just had this complete mental block against Metro, like typical news. Um, and I also am not a morning person. So when my editor approached me, I was like, there's no way I can do this morning reporter job and wake up, at 5:30 every morning. Long story short, I ended up trying the position for a week just as like a trial run. Super fortunate that they allowed me to do that. And of course, I fell in love with it. And I was like, this is great. I actually am capable of writing, a breaking news story. It's actually way more straightforward than some of the stuff I was doing in features. So that's kind of how I switched from features to news. But even though I'm writing in news now, like I still find myself seeking out those opportunities to do feature type writing, which is why I like weather so much. That still lives within me.
Mhm. Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever, because one of the things, in fact, Jerry was talking about in the
Mhm.
previous interview about being determined, and how many times people say no to you, and no, I don't want to do an interview. No, I don't want to talk to you, that kind of thing. Have you
Mm.
had a lot of that, or have you actually had to chase people down the street, kind of like Jesse Jones or something, where somebody doesn't really want to talk to you because they're embarrassed about something, and so you've got to, I don't know, keep knocking on the door until they answer or something. Has that happened to
Mhm.
you?
Um, Definitely no, not to the extent of chasing people down the street, but something that's interesting that it didn't even occur to me that this might be an issue within my current role. I'm working 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. So when I log on and my editor and I have discussions of like, okay, we need to contact this person, we need to contact this organization, I will send those emails and make those calls when I'm on, 7 a.m. And I realize most people are not on at that time. So I often have difficulty just because of my schedule, getting a hold of people, or they won't get back to me until like 9 a.m., 10 a.m. I mean, that's part of my day's over at that point. Um, I haven't had as much difficulty with people not necessarily wanting to talk. A lot of the sources that I'm in contact with, at least on the breaking news side of things, are all public information officers. So, that's their job. They're meant for that role. They're like the point person at whatever organization I'm reaching out to. So that hasn't been difficult. There have been a couple stories also in breaking news where I've had to contact family and have those difficult conversations. And I always understand if that's a case of, they don't feel comfortable talking, or it's just not the right time if they've just lost a loved one. So I run into that a little bit as well, but that's not super often.
So now have you or do you have any desire to do TV or radio or podcasting or some of
Mhm.
those other mediums?
Yeah, well, I studied broadcast news when I was in school. So that was my original plan up until I was applying for jobs second semester senior year, approaching graduation. And I kind of had this realization where in broadcast, typically you start in a really small market, move your way up city to city. And I'm from Seattle, from the Seattle area. And I knew that part of the reason why I'm so passionate about what I do is because I feel so connected to this community that I've always called home. I'm familiar with it and I know this place. And for me, I really wanted to return to Seattle and start reporting right after college, which would have not been possible if I stayed in broadcast. Typically for a broadcast reporter, you have to put in, at least 5 years, maybe sometimes even 10 in smaller markets before you can come back to a city like Seattle. So I knew I didn't want to do that. I was really, really determined to get back to Seattle, which is why I started applying for jobs at different types of organizations, print. That's how I applied for my Seattle Times job, just kind of seeing what would stick at that point. And yeah, long story short, ended up in print, which I'm happy about now because I think I actually really like writing, and I think in broadcast I wouldn't have been able to do that as much. Um, but I never say never. If I one day get on camera, I wouldn't be mad about that at all, especially if I was doing something lifestyle. That'd be fun.
So what do you like most about what you do and what's I don't know, the least desirable thing or the most challenging or the thing that you just wish, "Oh, wow, I wish I didn't have to do this sometimes." Anything like
Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind is kind of the same for both. The most challenging thing for me as a reporter and as someone, it's my job to write. Uh, Sometimes my mind, I'm not in a writing mindset. Sometimes I'm on deadline. Sometimes I've been like chipping away at an enterprise story. And no matter how much I'm trying to spend time writing, it's just not flowing. I'm kind of getting that writer's block. I run into that sometimes, and that can be really difficult because for me, when I'm like in the zone, I can write very, very, very quick, especially with like the pace that I've had to be on for my morning reporter job. That first hour of the day, writing a couple stories for that morning brief newsletter, I'm very used to at this point writing fast. But if I'm not in that mindset, it can be very difficult. So that's for me one of the most challenging aspects of the job. But it also is one of my favorite parts, just the fact that I get to write for a living. When I was in college, when I first started, I actually was studying chemistry, which is, complete opposite STEM major. Wanted to work at NASA and do something with space. Um, and ended up going down that track all of my freshman year. And the math classes were the thing that kind of ended up tripping me up. So I had a moment when I was still in college and I was like, what is something that has always come very naturally to me? And I remember like sitting on my bed. It was during summer break. I was like, I know I need to switch. What is something that calls to me? And that's always been writing. So I feel very fortunate that I get to do that every day and get paid to do it. Just writing. Because I think, I have friends of mine. I have a friend that works in finance. So our brains are complete opposite. She's really good at math and she can't imagine having to write all day long. But for me, it's a dream. So yeah.
wow, you never know. I know that when I was, wow, I was in junior high school, and I just always liked writing because I was an only child, and I used to just kind of sit in my room or walk around, let my imagination kind of go, and I always thought, wouldn't it be great to I was really into music, so
Mm,
I started writing little albums. Remember that word,
Oh,
album
yeah,
reviews
yeah.
for the junior high school newspaper,
Mhm.
thinking that, "Oh, this is fun," but then actually what wound up happening is when I got my first job at a newspaper, I started doing album reviews for real. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah,
That's full
so
circle. Yeah.
yeah, and I wound up interviewing people that I had been listening to their records in my room by myself, and now I'm actually sitting down interviewing some of these people.
Yeah.
So, what I found with a lot of journalists are that it goes back to childhood sometimes when they first got that bug or something. But when did you first, was it when you were in college that you really thought about writing, or did you have an inkling maybe when you were much younger that, hey, I really like writing. Maybe one day I could be a reporter.
Yeah, I did not have that inkling, and I wish I did, because I think if I knew from an early age that I wanted to be a reporter, maybe things would have been fast tracked a little bit. But yeah, I didn't necessarily have an inkling when I was younger. I'm also an only child, and I grew up, I would always start journals, like journaling, which is a practice that I still do today. And I would do that often when I was younger, but I never thought to myself, I wanted to be like a journalist. I will say, and this kind of connects to how I decided on broadcast specifically, when I was in college, but when I was younger, I went to an acting school. I was comfortable being on camera. So when I had that moment in college where I was like, okay, I know I'm good at writing. How can I turn this into career? That's why I thought of broadcast, because I literally remembered thinking back, oh, I used to do acting. And when I was younger, I wanted to become an actress. So
There's still
that was,
time, you could still do it.
yeah. So that was kind of the connection there. I was like, I'm comfortable in front of camera. I like to write, put those two things together, broadcast journalism. That's literally how my mind was working when I was like, what major should I switch to? But yeah, it wasn't necessarily like I had always known I wanted to be a journalist. But there were definitely kind of components that were present at an earlier
Mhm,
age.
mhm. So as a woman, do you find that there's any challenges that you face as a woman in the media, or is it something that you don't even think about, or are there certain things that have happened that kind of remind you that, oh, I'm a woman, I might have to, I don't know, do something, take a certain approach to what I'm doing?
Yeah, I'll say I've been in this reporting position for a year and a half now. And in the times when I've been doing in-person reporting where, I'm at the scene with other news reporters from other news organizations, or at a courthouse, doing a story for an arraignment, whatever it might be, it's the thought has never crossed my mind about being a woman in that space. And that is specifically partly because I see other women doing the same thing when I go out to the scene. There are other women reporters from Como or Cairo that are also on the scene. So I've never felt like I was the only one. And I think that's very much a testament to like the current age that we are in. I don't know if it would have been the same if I was doing this 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Um, but in this space right now in the newsroom, I definitely haven't run into um, any obstacles because of my gender. The only thing I will say that has kind of come up to me is my age. I'm 25. I graduated college in 2021, so 3 years ago. And I think sometimes I run into, and this isn't just specific to the Seattle Times, but in the industry as a whole, kind of this like early career journalists, and the perception of people starting out compared to, people who've been doing it literally longer than I've been alive. There's some reporters at the Times who have been doing their jobs for 25, 35 years. And whenever they say that, I'm like, that's my whole life. So that's incredible. But I will say that there is a mindset difference, at least from what I've observed, between early career journalists and people who are really established. I think for me, something I prioritize in my job, especially because I don't work typical 9 to 5 hours, is I really try to have a hard cutoff and a line between my work time and then my personal time for me. So when it's 2 p.m., I really try to log off at that time and have a separation of these two aspects of my life. I think in the past, and something that I've run into with other reporters who are older, there's this mindset that, you're always on as a reporter. You're always working 24/7. And for me, that's really not the case. I really try to protect my own time. And I think that's also a testament to kind of a lot of the things that the pandemic brought to the surface about mental health, and really being cognizant of what you need and making those boundaries. I think that's definitely more of an accepted idea nowadays than even maybe 5 years ago. But that's something I've noticed in different age groups, not as much me being a woman, but as a younger reporter, I've run into that a few times.
Last question is, what advice would you give to someone thinking about a career as a journalist? I mean, it could be a high school student, or it could even be an adult who's maybe thinking about changing careers. How should they prepare themselves to do this?
Yeah, I never had an internship in college. Um and I think, people always say get an internship, get that experience, but I think it can be broader than that. It doesn't have to be an internship at a professional news organization. I think if anyone is interested in journalism, spending time doing what you would do in your role, whether that is reporting, writing, doing podcasts, being in front of the camera, trying to incorporate that in your own time is such a big help. Experience doesn't have to be in a professional space. If you can prove that you're capable of doing the thing that you are striving to do, whether it's, just running a blog in your own personal time or making YouTube videos, like all of that is experience in today's day and age, and in media today. So I think if someone's interested in journalism, like really, really tuning in to those opportunities that may not necessarily look like or have been traditional opportunities in the past, I think is really important. If you can prove when you get to that hiring interview that, look, I'm interested in being on camera, and here's my YouTube channel of me being on camera for the past couple of years that I've just done in my own time. That goes a long way. So I think that's really important, just looking for those opportunities in everyday life, that they don't have to be in a professional space or connected to a news organization. If you could just prove that you're capable of doing it and willing to do it, I think that goes so far. And I also think if anyone is interested in journalism and in this path, like reaching out to people who you see are journalists right now, especially so as a younger journalist, something that I've been really, really passionate about is connecting with other students, current students, high school students, college students. I went back to WSU last month for their symposium and did a panel there. Went to the state high school journalism conference, talked to high schoolers there. I think what's really important, no matter how old you are, is if you can find someone in your industry that you're interested in joining, and set up an informal interview with them. Just spend some time. Hey, can I give you a call? I want to just ask you a few questions. When I did that when I was in college, everyone was open to it. And when people reach out to me nowadays, I'm super open to it. Just to form a relationship. And you also never know, like if you do connect with someone informally and then you end up applying for a job one day at their organization, that could be a reference as well. So making those connections early on, I also think is great. And then setting up those informal interviews, that's an opportunity to ask someone, what is your job like to actually get that firsthand knowledge. So
Yeah,
that's
and
a
I've seen a lot of professionals, I mean, even in SABJ who are
Mhm.
very open to talking to people
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
sharing that experience and wisdom. Last thing I'm just going to ask you to do is just say hi and then say your name.
Okay. My first and last name. Hi, I am Vonnai Phair.
Perfect. It's just something I insert into the podcast.
Cool.
So, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to
Um,
ask?
let me see. I had your email pulled up with some like sample questions.
Oh, yeah, it's somewhere on one of these screens here. I think we kind of covered everything, but I just wanna
Yeah, I think Yeah, I think we did. One other thing that I remembered I was going to say is that curiosity goes so far, and this can kind of connect back to the previous question you asked me about what should, wannabe journalists do, but having that natural curiosity and nurturing that and whatever that might look like, I think is really important because as journalists, we are curious. We ask questions. We want to know the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, all the things. So having that curiosity, nurturing that curiosity is also really important. That's a huge skill as a journalist.